donate button and choose to become a monthly donor or give a one-time gift. Any amount helps WHIV and supports the programming we bring to you 24/7. Ours are voices of dissent, so please donate. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you can join us as a member. Coming up right now is what everybody's been waiting for, and that is Resistance Radio.
When machines and computers, profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
I still rap my hijab, rap my hijab, rap my hijab, rap my hijab. Keep swagging my hijab, swagging my hijab, swagging my hijab, swagging my hijab.
They have a Black History Month, but we don't have a White History Month. Well, all we've ever been taught is white history.
If it was not for the love and respect shown to me by black women, those right-wing, ultra-conservative, alt-right haters, they would have me believe I'm too black, I'm too confrontational, I'm too tough, and I'm too disrespectful of them. But now, I know I'm simply a strong black woman.
We're in a time where corporations are treated like people and people are treated like things. They promote legislation that attacks voting rights, the poor, LGBT citizens, the immigrant community, and civil rights that are lewd, mean-spirited, and fundamentally contrary to what our democracy is supposed to be about. What is bad is not what they are doing. What would be bad is for us not to fight back.
This is 102.3 WHIV FM. This is Resistance Radio. Before we start Resistance Radio, I wanted to play a quick clip of Martin Luther King's last speech. I've been to the mountaintop that was delivered on April 3rd, 1968. That was almost 50 years ago to the day.
America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
And that was Martin Luther King's last speech. I've been to the mountaintop, given on April 3rd at the Mason Temple in Memphis, Tennessee. Of course, the next day, Dr. King was assassinated. With me today is, of course, my co-host and great friend, and clearly, without question, the smartest person named Kenny in this room, Kenny Francis, indivisible steering committee member of NOLA member. Thank you, Kenny. I'm sorry, I'm a little choked up by that.
It's a pleasure to be on with the best doctor to this side of the table.
Touche. But it's taken you what, almost 5 months to start retaliating. Before we get started with a great guest that we have with us today, Mr. Jim Francis, who is running for U.S. Congress 2018. Kenny, I mean, of course, April 4th, Martin Luther King was assassinated. We start this show with Martin Luther King's words, literally as a part of the intro for our show, and then, of course, playing this talk here, the speech in which he was speaking about his longevity, and the next day he was assassinated.
Yeah, and I think that, as we were just talking about off air while we were listening, is I think he knew. I think he knew that with his opposition to the Vietnam War, with the Poor People's Campaign, with the direction that he was heading with his rhetoric, that he knew that he had gone, for a lot of folks, too far. And I don't think it came, I don't think he thought 24 hours later, but I think that Martin Luther King Jr. had no doubt in his mind that forces to be wanted him dead, and that they wanted his voice silenced.
Right. I mean, JFK had died had been assassinated a few years prior to him, and I think RFK had been assassinated after. Right. Okay. I hear you on that. Again, I agree with you. I don't think that 24 hours later. But you're right. I think that he probably recognized that he had perhaps touched some nerves, because what he was doing was truly radical. And I would love to get your, you had mentioned to me that your grandmother.
Yeah, my grandmother actually moved to America the same week, like 4 days later after MLK Jr. was shot. And you can imagine what being a black female immigrant the week that happened in America was like.
And she came here by herself with the family?
By herself. She came here leaving my grandfather and her 3 children back home in Trinidad to come make a life for our family here.
Right. And then that must have been a very difficult time, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, talk about America burning, right?
Right. The WHIV is going to be having MLK speeches throughout the day on Wednesday, obviously in honor of Dr. King's, in recognition of Dr. King's assassination. I was in Memphis delivering a speech a couple days ago, actually, and ended they were delivering a medical talk, and I felt very privileged to be able to end with a quote. It was a slide that I have of Dr. King giving a peace sign, and on it basically just says that I'm going to paraphrase, of all inequities, the greatest inequities of all is the inequities in healthcare. And that was, I was speaking about Hep C and HIV and the inequities. And when you look at infectious diseases, at least, that the infectious diseases are definitely affect a more impoverished populations. Infectious diseases are diseases of the poor, and that's not, that's not a coincidence. Poverty leads to higher rates of infections. And so, but all of that just wanted to acknowledge Dr. King's amazing life and his inspiration. And we're going to use this as as we're going to quickly just talk about what's happening and what happened in Palestine Okay, go ahead, Kenny.
Before we do that, I want to jump in since it's relevant to us doing the activism updates. The Action Network, you can find out more information about this at actionnetwork.org, is organizing a trip to Memphis, leaving tomorrow, Tuesday, April 3rd, and coming back on Wednesday. The short information was, please join workers, communities of faith, and folks in Louisiana for a bus trip to Memphis for the MLK 50 commemorative march. Food will be provided, and bus transportation will pick up and drop off from Corpus Christi Community Resource Center, which is 2022 St. Bernard Avenue in New Orleans. There also will be a pickup from Baton Rouge. You can find out more information at actionnetwork.org.
Great. So again, just very quickly, just kind of using, again, the spirit and the philosophies of Dr. King and how he would be looking at the Israeli-Palestine situation. There's no question that his heart and soul would be with the Palestinian people, and just kind of
not if you believe what some people would say about MLK. I know I was
on
about his birthday. I did a whole rant about the whitewashing of his legacy.
Right. And I was gonna actually say, and then we just we went off on the side, but yeah, the whitewashing of MLK is obviously something that we talked about on his birthday, and I would imagine every year we will continue to talk about both on his birthday as well as on April 4th, or the closest to April 4th that we can get this show. But the this Friday there was a massive and bloody massacre that occurred on the Gaza Strip by the Israeli Defense Forces. It is not being talked about in any of the mainstream news media outlets. If you are hearing about this for the first time and you consider yourself to be well informed, please consider your sources, because if you have not heard about this, you need to question your sources of where you get your information. But
sorry to interrupt, but like what's crazy about this is, as you and I were talking about this,
I was just about to say that.
Mark Allen texted me about this, and we do this show every week, and part of it is I scour the news every week.
Kenny is more informed than any other person I know.
I had no idea what you were talking about.
Question your sources.
I had no idea what you were talking about. I ended up having to find the information from like foreign sources because I couldn't find anything written about it from American sources.
And so Kenny came up with the very clever name as the Passover Massacre. And let me just explain very quickly what happened. It was Land Day in Palestine or on the Gaza Strip. Land Day is essentially the day that the Palestinians remember their right of return. So in 1948, in a move of ethnic cleansing, Israel moved all Palestinians off of their lands, out of their homes, so they can create a Jewish state that had a majority of Jewish people. And of course, this led to the creation of a Palestinian, I wanted to say country, but we don't even have a Palestine or a Palestinian country, but certainly the Gaza. On that very day on Land Day, they approached is it the neutral zone? It's the neutral zone. They approached the neutral zone.
I just want to interject just with some numbers here. 30,000 people had organized in a peaceful protest. There were 30,000 Palestinians.
30,000 Palestinians, and the Israeli Defense Forces opened fired with live bullets
on unarmed civilians.
On unarmed civilians. They injured 1,000 people
17
and
were
killed 17 people. And And what makes this even more infuriating, as an American Jew, as a son of an immigrant family that came from North Africa, Jew, and who my family was kicked out of Spain because of their Jewish religion during the Inquisition. The Jews have been a persecuted people, and this is something that I've been so proud of as an American Jew. But to see in the name of Judaism or a Jewish homeland like Israel to be just cruel beyond belief and to open fire on unarmed people on the day of Passover. So what is Passover? Passover is the Jewish holiday that celebrates the freedom of the Jewish people out of slavery and being captive by the Egyptians. And the whole point of Passover is to celebrate. It's a day of liberation, and it's a day to celebrate freedom of peoples. And that the IDF would open fire with live ammunition onto 1,000 people and kill 17 of them on Passover. The irony of it is beyond belief. But then the thing that also is beyond belief is the fact that is not being covered on any of the media at all in the U.S.
What it reminds me of is it reminds me of the Sharpeville massacre in 1960 in South Africa. If you don't know what I'm talking about, very briefly, the Sharpeville massacre was a shooting that happened in South Africa where over 5,000 South Africans, black South Africans and white South Africans were protesting pass laws, which were essentially an eternal passport that was used to segregate the population. And they were also obviously protesting apartheid. The police opened fire on unarmed, peaceful protesters, ended up killing about 70 people and wounding many others, many of whom who were shot as they were running away. And the parallel that I see here is not just an oppressive state opening fire and using state-sanctioned violence against a people who were protesting for rights, but also that was another thing that was widely not reported in international media, and the world turned a blind eye to what was happening in South Africa for such a long time, in the same way that the world continues to turn a blind eye of what's happening in Palestine, where it's hard to believe that something like this happened on Passover. And I literally couldn't find an American news media source to find out what happened in the story. But it fits the narrative of what's been happening in Palestine for years and the U.S.'s inaction. And something that I was thinking about off air is, Netanyahu has always been a hardliner since he came into office, but he's really been emboldened by the Trump administration. He's really been emboldened where he not only feels the freedom to do things like this, he feels the backing. I know that we talked about it when it happened, but Trump announcing that he's moving the embassy to Jerusalem was essentially Trump saying America is on the side of Israel, and Israel, you can do whatever you want to Palestine.
No matter what.
That's essentially and our policy, however critical you want to be of U.S. policy towards the Israel-Palestine issue over the years, our policy had always tried to at least kind of remain in the middle and still give support to Palestinians, and we were obviously supporting Israel much more, but recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel is essentially saying we're on Israel's side. And it's clearly given Netanyahu a green light to do things like this. And this is just this is just the most recent example of what has become his much more aggressive stance, where it started with, they started rebuilding the settlements, and then there was a pushback on that, and then they violently pressed that down, and then now there's this, and it's going to continue to get worse, because just like what's happening with Russia and Putin, the world's not going to stand up to Netanyahu unless America does. At the end of the day, that's the way that this always goes in both Eastern Europe and in this Israel-Palestine, is the world goes as the U.S. goes. And until we have a president and administration that calls this what it is, which is gross human rights abuses and apartheid, this is going to continue. Netanyahu is going to continue to be a hardliner.
And I also want to say this before we go, because I know the hour is going to slip away very quickly. But I also want to say that kudos, love, respect to the Palestinian people. This is what the Israelis are fearing, is peaceful protest, because it's the quote unquote violent protests. It's the protest that, it's the bombings. I heard a Palestinian once describe it. What would happen if somebody put a pillow over your face while you're sleeping and you all of a sudden woke up? Your first reaction would be to remove that pillow off your face to stop suffocating. And how the Palestinians are responding. But that now that Hamas has been able to take all of that youthful energy and now shape it into peaceful protest, because it's that peaceful protest where the globe is going to stand up and say, enough. There is no way that you can continue to massacre peaceful protesters in the streets like that.
And where I actually found my information about this story on Al Jazeera, there was a really good article written on there about this, about what happened on Friday. And one of the points that the author makes in the article is how time and time again, liberal Israelis have said that, well, if Palestine had a Gandhi figure who was preaching nonviolence, and
Thomas Friedman was making that,
then, this would have been over years ago and it wouldn't be like this. Well, here's yet another example of peaceful protest, and this is where it's gotten. So, I mean, it's the same sort of faulty logic that say, well, how should black people protest against police brutality?
Right. Yeah, it's a great example. In fact, I love seeing the Palestinians walk around with signs that say Black Lives Matter. The analogy is an excellent one. Absolutely. And there, again, this is yet another episode where it's like drinking water from a fire hose. There's so much for us to talk about. Obviously, Alton Sterling. Of course, all of the protests have been happening in Sacramento. But we do have a guest with us, so we're going to shift. If you're tuning in, you are listening to Resistance Radio. With you are your two hosts, Mark Allandari and Kenny Francis. With us, however, is Jim Francis.
No relation.
Who is running for the U.S. Congress against Steve Scalise, who is the current whip of the House. Jim Francis, more information about Jim Francis can be found at jimfrancis4congress.com. Jim, thank you so much for... okay, go ahead,
Before
Kenny.
we let Jim jump in, I just want to clarify for folks, because I don't think everyone knows what a whip is. Steve Scalise is the House Majority Whip. The Republicans are in control of the House, meaning that he's the number 2 most powerful Republican in Congress below Paul Ryan. So this is a big deal. This is a very powerful seat that he sits in. He has a lot of control over the agenda, over what gets on the docket, over the way that the Republican caucus votes. And so unseating someone like Steve Scalise while he is the whip would be an enormous victory.
And also, before we introduce Jim, thank you, Kenny, for stopping me from doing that. As we do with all political candidates and figures that appear on WHIV.
Steve. Come see us.
We open our airwaves to Mr. Steve Scalise. We would love to have you on air. I would be more than happy to ask you, Mr. Scalise, about what it's like to be shot.
I emailed them.
Did you? To appear on air? Yeah, of course. What it's like to be shot, take that sweet NRA money, and then after being shot and almost killed, what's it like to then stand up and then continue to promote?
Do you think the $33,000 he got in the last cycle is enough for a flight to New Orleans?
To appear on WHIV, right? Maybe. Anyway, we, of course, in all seriousness, if there's anybody else who's running for this position, because we have Mr. Francis on, we obviously by federal law need to have all open up our airways for all political candidates who are running for this particular seat. This is for the 1st congressional. Correct. This is the first congressional seat, which is essentially covers basically the Metairie area and North Shore, or I'll just, well, here's Mr. Jim Francis. Thank you for appearing on WHIV.
Oh, Mark, thank you so much, and Kenneth. Yes, the area that it covers is parts of Orleans, the North Shore, down to the Gulf, up to Washington Parish. Looks like a large tuning fork. It's very gerrymandered, and that's what we're up against.
Great. And then your experience is this your first time running for a political office?
This is my first time, yes.
And what brings you to?
Yeah, let's start with who are you? Let's start with that.
Yes.
Who are you? Where are you from? What's your background?
All right, I'm Jim Francis. I'm 46 years old. I have a wife and a son. We live on the North Shore. I am the director of IT for a laboratory. And should I get into my background?
This is your hour, buddy.
All right, let me tell you how I got to this point. What happened for me was that growing up, I grew up in Ohio, and my father was a teacher. My mom was an interior decorator, very standard kind of middle-class story. And this is something I was talking about with my son, actually, a couple weeks ago. He asked me, why am I doing this? Why do I think I could do this? I remember helping my dad run for the school board for the first time. I was about 8 years old, and I remember him putting signs out, getting signatures and things like that. That I remember, but what I remember the most was him actually taking the time to talk to people and find out what their concerns were. Because our school district was not doing as good as it could, and he wanted to make a change. And that's what I really remember, that he took the time. As a little kid, I didn't realize, how important this was, but he heard what the other people's concerns were. And now looking back, it wasn't so much his concerns, but it was the concerns that he got from the other people. And that's what he ran on, changed it, and it's now an excellent school district. So that's one of the things that I really remember, that the power of the vote, the power of people wanting change. And what we're seeing now is this happening. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it happen again. This is a very unique year, and there just has to be change. Louisiana's been abandoned for far too long, especially the 1st District. As you know, Steve Scalise just simply refuses to meet with people who he represents, and I don't agree with that whatsoever. He's a career politician. He wants to do everything in his power.
Hold on, you said he's a queer politician?
A career.
Oh, career. I thought you said queer politician. I thought you were breaking some news on WHIV.
Very, very funny. But no, his main focus has always been the lobbyists and not the people of the 1st District, and they have paid for it because of that. And one example I would give is that, for the last 13, 14 months, he's been in total power. Republicans have had the House, the Senate, the White House, everything. He could have done some seriously good things for Louisiana. Has not done one thing. So we've seen his true colors in the last 14 months, and he is not going to provide anything with that power for the 1st District. And I don't want to see it decline further. Louisiana is in a very bad shape, and he really, if he was focused on the people, he could do something for the 1st District. And he's not.
So I want to jump in here and ask a question, and then in a little bit I want to get into specific issue topics. If I'm a savvy voter from the North Shore, from this district, and I'm looking at this seat, and it's a traditionally conservative district that has been held by Republicans for a while, and you've got your representative is the House Majority Whip, which is, like we previously said, is a very powerful position in Congress. There's an argument to be made that how much good could you do for the district as a Democrat in the minority power, as opposed to someone whose views you may not fully agree with, but who has a very powerful seat in our current government. So I guess my first part would be, what do you want to do for your district, and also coming in as a Democrat in what may still be the minority power, hopefully not. What do you actually think you could get done as a Democrat from Louisiana in a GOP-controlled House?
Great question. But remember that it's only controlled right now. Let's see what happens in November. I think we're going to take the House. I don't know about the Senate. Nobody does. So having a whip on your team doesn't help when he becomes a minority whip at all. And I keep hearing about how Scalise is all-powerful as a whip and everything. But if people would think about it, being a whip actually means you represent the Republican Party. You almost give up representing the district that you're from. And I think that's a big part of the problem, in my opinion. But you also asked me what I would do different. As a Democrat, what would I bring? And if you look at the stats of Louisiana, you'll see a lot of bad numbers. Lots and lots of bad numbers.
Boy, do we!
We're really good at
we
really
review
good
those
at being
numbers here pretty well.
I bet you do.
Really low at things.
So, one thing I can tell you, I'm not a career politician, and one thing I am absolutely sick of are lobbyists dictating bills that the people bring to the floor, all of a sudden get passed, and it gets written into the books. So it's the lobbyists that are dictating.
So you're saying that Alec hasn't given you any money yet?
I have not received a single penny, nor will I, from any of these lobbyists or large.
Well, actually, let me just quickly say: are you accepting any your donations? Are you accepting donations from any corporate PACs, or who are you accepting? You can't run it. Unfortunately, we're not at a point where we can run campaigns on through public funds. So
my ultimate goal would be to get money out of politics, but this is the game they created, and we have to play it. So I can confirm I will not accept any donations from anybody or corporation or PAC that I do not completely agree with. So I'm not interested in NRA's money. I'm not interested in oil and gas's money. I'm not. So to answer that question, that's how it's going to go.
Are you familiar with the Justice Democrats?
Yes, I am.
Have you looked into the Justice Democrats?
I've met with them. I've interviewed before them.
Got it.
So
because their big issue is not accepting any PAC money whatsoever. Right. It's small donations.
Right. And so far up to this day, it has been all small donations.
Got it. And then, are you at liberty to say whether or not you've been considered as a Justice Democrat?
I could not confirm either way.
Okay.
Actually, they're still talking.
Got it. Okay.
So
I will chime in here and say that like I do have a differing view on that. That like I get that money needs to come out of politics. I think we are all agreed here in this room, but I think PACs that support things that you are for, I think, like you said, you got to play the game, right? Like I think I wouldn't begrudge Jim or any other candidate for accepting money from PACs that follow the views they have.
Right, but it's like 10 bad PACs to one good PAC.
Right. True.
It's like of all the
But that's
unions,
why there's like an argument out there to be made that
we just need to remove money from politics
altogether. There need to be more money in the PACs that support things that aren't evil. Right.
But I mean, the majority of it is, like you said, it's all ALEC based. So just to kind of go back to what you were saying, I mean, we talk about ALEC here, the American Legislative Exchange Council, on a regular basis, and how it seemed like Kenny did a very, very detailed analysis of all of or some of the key bills that is of interest to us, that resonates with Resistance Radio, that we talk about regularly here. And a good part of them, I thought they were all going to be terrible. They were mostly terrible, and the mostly terrible ones all seem like they were a bunch of Me Too. In medicine, we refer to Me Too drugs. Like one statin is the same as another statin. They're all the same, or ACE inhibitors, the different blood pressure medications. These all look like Me Too bills. They were all, and they all originated from one entity, ALEC, who then goes and spreads those. They're the Johnny Appleseed of bad bills around the country. And we know that we have a competent, or at least a barely competent legislator when they're able to change the state name from Missouri to Louisiana. That's the first thing I look for. Are they able to change the state name and add Louisiana to it? So, but your overall point was lobbyist.
Yeah, it's gotten almost grotesque at this point.
You can say just straight up grotesque. I mean, not almost. It is.
Okay, I was trying to be at least somewhat kind. But
this is Resistance Radio, baby.
We're not kind.
Look at that tax bill from December. Unbelievable. That will go down in history as the textbook example.
The giveaway, the greatest giveaway.
Right, absolutely. And a lot of those bills weren't even read all the way through.
So I saved a lot of money on my taxes, guys. Easy.
Oh yeah? Wait until March when you file your taxes. Right. Wait until you file next March.
Kenny Francis, facetious all of a sudden. Go ahead, please.
To get back to Kenneth's question about what would I do as a Democrat from the 1st District. First and foremost, Social Security has to be off limits. We cannot give, let's admit it. It's all to give this out to more corporations to make more billions in dollars in profit and everything else. So hands off Social Security. Do not touch it. Do not touch Medicare and Medicaid. Do not voucherize it. Do not give the infrastructure rebuilding in this country over to corporations that are going to add a toll road every 5 miles. You're double taxing everybody. It's absurd. And what we're seeing with this administration are just, smoke screens left and right while they pass this through. A lot of people are very upset by the rhetoric that Trump says and everybody else, but watch what they're doing. And the real bills that are actually getting passed and submitted and what's tucked into them, that's the stuff that I'm most concerned about.
So let me then also say that last week we got the news that Dr. David Shulkin was fired as the chief of the Veterans Administration. This is somebody who was an Obama appointee who stayed over into Trump's presidency for about a year or so, and he was probably, I was trying to do the math, I think maybe the 840th person that was fired.
Fired by tweet.
Yeah. Fired by tweet. Can't even do it face to face. Did you hear they had a phone call earlier?
That day. No one got it worse than Reese now.
Who? Who?
Reince Priebus?
What happened with him?
Do you not remember what happened?
Dude, I can't even remember what happened. So remember I told you the tweet that
Priebus was my favorite firing, where they were literally at like a... how Trump's been doing these like campaign style events all over the country, right. And they were coming back from one of those, and Trump and Bannon got in a limo, and then security just stopped Priebus and was like, "We need to talk to you for a second." And they put him in a different limo and didn't let him get on Air Force One, and Air Force One left, and then some other staffer was like, "Oh, by the way, you're fired. This limo is going to take you to a different airport."
Hold on, do you know
that's literally how you found out?
Do you know that's how it would happen with Chris Christie too? Trump told Chris Christie to go get him some McDonald's. So Chris Christie went and got the McDonald's. He took the bag and then got separated just like that. Wow. Trump has a way of doing that.
I mean, I wish I had any sympathy for these guys, but it's like, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, it's like, what's your name? My name is Reek. It rhymes with meek. Like, it's just, this is what you signed up for.
Right. So my concern, and I literally, the night that he got fired, I had restless sleep that night. And the reason why I was fearing that we are seriously moving into a world of everything in this country is being completely privatized.
Absolutely.
And there's no question that they fired Dr. Shulkin because they are trying to privatize the VA, and he was that last stop that was stopping the. And this morning when I was reading the news, what I read, it was an analysis that if Shulkin was indeed fired, by law, they actually have to go to his deputy instead of as opposed to him resigning. Because if he resigns, then Trump is able to appoint a new person. Right. But if he was fired, the deputy moves forward. And ideally, hopefully, the deputy will also not see to privatization. But I think that this speaks to a bit of what you're talking about, Social Security.
Absolutely. That's what we're going to see. It's just more and more attempts to give it to corporations. That's all he's doing. That's been his MO the entire time, is to simply give to the donors that he receives from.
So some of the issues that you are,
I had no idea what you were talking about.
So it's mine. It's mine.
Well, actually,
no, you lost it.
No, I want to jump in because I want to ask something very specific here. So you're running as a Democrat in Louisiana.
Yes.
As a Democrat in Louisiana, the two issues that always come up is abortion and gun violence. And I want to get super specific about what your views are on that, where we have a Democratic governor that's pro-life and pro-gun, and it's very difficult to get elected in the state of Louisiana without having those two views. So I wanted you to talk a bit about what your views are on that.
And in most states, he would be considered a Republican.
Well, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Pro-gun. Go ahead.
Well, no, I'll gladly answer both those questions. My view on abortion, it's I'm pro-life even after birth. But I
love that. Okay.
But I absolutely need to protect a woman's right to choose. It's in our constitutional law that is available to women if they decide to do that after talking to their support staff or husband or doctors or anything else. We just see a constant attack on that right, obviously, with women's reproductive health. And then you talked about guns.
So wait, I want to.
Yeah. We need to stop you there.
Not just going to let you get it.
Yeah.
So just to super clarify, so you are personally pro-life. However, you support legislatively pro-choice, as that is the law. I want to get more specific.
Actually, I need to correct you.
Yeah,
no,
go ahead.
I am pro-choice across the board, but I am really upset the fact that the people who are claiming to be pro-life are really just pro-birth.
I agree.
And the moment somebody is born, you're on your own. Good luck, and
pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Exactly.
That's kind of how I understood when you said pro-life, including after birth. But specifically, we on Resistance Radio were very, very specific, and I often say I started WHIV so that we can have conversations where women have full autonomy over their body.
Absolutely.
And the conversation starts there. Right. So I think Kenny and I are trying to get you to.
I also think that something that has frequently happened on both sides of the aisle is that it's very easy for a politician to come out and say they're pro-choice, but then also not support anything that actually allows women to have choice, like funding for Planned Parenthood. Right. So I want to specifically ask, do you support funding for Planned Parenthood?
Absolutely, across the board. I mean, that's one of the smallest things they do is abortion. Look at how many diseases they detect. I mean, the screenings and everything. It's women that they educate women. There is nothing. Why would somebody be against an organization that is educating women about their situation?
Because it has two key words in there that you need to understand: education and women.
Right. Exactly. And I think the second one is more important. We just see this constant attack on this, and it could be a Republican movement to drive people to vote or to donate and everything else, because they've had 14 months now. If they wanted to attack Roe versus Wade, they could have. They haven't touched it. They haven't done a thing.
Wait a second. I mean, we are on the cusp now of potential. I mean, Mississippi just passed a law. It was Mississippi, right? Yeah, it was Mississippi
Was
just
it
passed a law.
20 weeks?
15
15
weeks
weeks,
now.
yes, yeah.
And now, essentially, what this is happening is that this is
there's
going
a 15th week bill in the Louisiana State House right now.
Right, there's
Right.
a 15-week bill, and then there's also a 15-week bill from your home state of Ohio as well, actually,
Right.
that the governor signed into law, who was supposed to be a moderate Republican and
Right.
blah, 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 blah. But the issue here is that I fear that this is going to be the bill that's going to work its way to the Supreme Court with this Supreme Court the way that it is.
The Mississippi one?
It's going to be.
Or the
It's going to be.
whole
It's
15-week,
all of them.
15-week
They're gonna scoop them all up together
Right.
and then look at them all together.
Who knows where Gorsuch is going to go?
Again, it's Kennedy. Kennedy's going to be that swing vote, and that's it. And Gorsuch, of course, is going to go. I mean, he clerked with Scalia and is far, far, far more right than Scalia ever was. Anyway, so I guess for us here, you are committing to all things pro-choice.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's get on to guns.
Absolutely. Guns, all we really want to see, from my point of view, is sensible gun legislation. Nobody wants to take anybody's guns.
We do.
Yeah,
I think.
we
No,
do.
wait.
we want to
But
repeal
wait.
the Second Amendment here on Resistance
Okay.
Radio. That's us here, but not you.
Okay, that's not my personal stance. But what I would say is we should define assault rifles. Right now, their argument is that there's no such thing as an assault rifle. I would like to have a definition of an assault rifle, and then go from there and restrict those. Not make them impossible to buy, but we need to seriously restrict their access. Maybe further vetting, more background, something. Something has to be done. You know, when I introduced a young man named Christopher in Baton Rouge for the March of Our Lives, he was he had a very strong, powerful speech, and I agreed with everything he said. And it really is. It's just enough. Enough is enough. We have to change the debate. We cannot give the NRA all the power. For one, we need to start putting USA ahead of NRA. I know that sounds like a cliche, but that really is my feeling personally.
It sounds pretty good. Put the USA ahead of the NRA. I like that, actually. So what you are actually demanding is obviously very sensible. It makes all the sense in the world. It requires, putting a definition, looking at some data and some science, and it all looks very, very logical on paper. It'll never pass because in our current system right now, I mean, the CDC can't even study gun violence.
Right, well,
and there's no definition.
I don't even want to get to like what a vote would look like, because I want to get more specific in that, because I'm interested by the point you made about defining what an assault rifle is and restricting it but not making it impossible to buy. I'd be interested to hear you talk more about your reasons for that view, because from my personal view, an assault rifle, I don't see any reason why a civilian needs an assault rifle.
Okay.
And
I agree.
And I know that, like, I used to be, and I am still very anti-gun. I do very much understand the logical argument around hunting and the traditions of it. However, many groups of hunters have come out and said that these assault weapons are not needed for hunting at all.
Right.
And I find it very hard to understand a logical situation in which a civilian needs access to a military-grade firearm in a non-wartime situation.
Let me clarify. I didn't say that they would be keeping those AR-15s at home. AR-15s, other assault rifles in that same category, are very fun to shoot. So perhaps we keep them locked up at a gun range. And the person goes there, they sign out their gun, they shoot, 500 rounds, they have all the fun in the world, gun goes back behind the safe, and that's it. No hunter is going to hunt with an assault rifle. Very few people protect their home with an AR-15. It just doesn't happen. You mentioned...
Yeah, they use them to shoot up schools.
Exactly. But that's what I'm talking about, is that we could put this into, they can still have these, but I agree, they need to be locked up, they need to be signed out, whatever, and Scalia himself even said the Second Amendment is not unlimited.
Right.
And he personally said handguns are the best way to protect your home because you can have a gun in one hand and a phone in the other. And that's from Scalia.
Right. Did you read the article I sent you last week about Chief Justice Stevens? who wrote. So former Chief Justice Stevens wrote a article, and there was an interview with him in 1992, and then he also rewrote an article for the New York Times. It was an editorial in the New York Times that appeared. I was in Memphis I think I texted to you on Wednesday. So either Wednesday or Tuesday of last week of the necessity for repealing the Second Amendment and how he referred to the NRA as the greatest fraud.
Yes.
And he repeated the word fraud. And every time he says it, he says, and I repeat the word fraud, that the NRA has foisted onto the American people because the Second Amendment was really, and there was a great book called Loaded, and I say it's great, I haven't read it yet, but I do plan on reading it. I've heard the author interviewed several times about how the guns and the issue with guns really came out of the southern states, that the northern states kind of said, okay, well, we'll build some gun amendment into the Constitution so that you can continue to police your forced labor workers, your slaves, essentially. And this is where the essentially where police forces kind of grew out of. And so, I appreciated that Chief Justice Stevens kind of reminded us, not that anybody's really going to listen, because it's really at this point that ship has sailed using logic. But certainly I was very happy to hear Chief Justice Stevens say that. I am open with the fact that I think that the repeal of the Second Amendment is important. I think I
think we should keep it, but I think, like I've said before, that people should be allowed to have muskets. Single shot. People should be allowed to have what the Second Amendment was written for: single shot muskets.
And I love that.
From some of the articles I read, our founding fathers wanted limits on guns.
Right. I'm sure they weren't dumb.
I also,
they saw guns
something I have to say every time we this is just like a pet peeve of mine, and you'll as we get to know each other better, is anytime anyone starts a sentence with our founding fathers, as a person who wasn't considered a person by the founding fathers, frankly, I don't give a damn what they thought. These are men who wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal," while literally owning slaves and considering women as not people.
I promise you,
I know
you will do that one time.
I know that I just jumped all over you about that, but it's like a personal pet peeve. Anytime someone starts talking about the Constitution or the founding fathers, like my head wants to explode.
I use it more of an expression to give you an idea of who I'm talking about, the group of people I'm talking about. That's all.
I've run into that many times. When I talk about the brilliance of the Constitution, I am stopped immediately. If you're tuning in, you're listening to Resistance Radio. I'm your host, Mark Allanderi. With me is co-host Kenny Francis. We have on Mr. Jim Francis, who is running for the 1st Congressional District against the House Majority Whip, Steve Scalise. And Jim Francis. More information for him can be found at jimfrancisforcongress.com. We are quickly running out of time, unfortunately. No, this is my turn. You totally I gave it to you. Okay. Okay, so I'm a physician. I am a physician. I care for people who have infectious diseases, and this is mostly diseases of the poor. I am also an advocate for single-payer system of healthcare, and I've always been an advocate for single-payer healthcare system. It's the only system that makes sense. And as I was growing up, I realized, it's not that we don't have a healthcare system for all because we think we could do better through a privatized system. It's that people are making money.
Yes.
Okay, so $5,000 is what most people spend around the world in industrialized countries that have a single-payer system. They pay $5,000 into the system annually. As Americans who are insured, or even if you're not insured, the mean average that most Americans put into the healthcare system is $10,000, and they still don't. And then they still don't get their medications. They still get rejected by insurance companies. They still don't get the care that they need. That extra $5,000 all goes to profits to the insurance companies, and it's one of the greatest frauds perpetrated on the American people. I was wondering if you can talk to us about your positions, because here on your card it says that you support universal health care for all.
Absolutely, and it only makes sense. The majority of the cost for privatized health insurance goes to administrative costs, which really is profits for CEOs and everything else. Why not create Medicare, use what they've done that is proven to be effective, and apply it to everybody? It's just amazing.
Well, the other thing too that I remind people is that we actually have 3 single payer systems in the U.S. Those three are, and count with me, Medicare,
Yep.
the Veterans Administration, and then one more group we haven't talked about, but is the Indian Health Services as well. So we actually have three systems of single payer here in the U.S., and yet we still are stuck in this quagmire of the Affordable Care Act, and it is a quagmire, and we also are stuck with a political system that's trying to repeal it
Right.
away from, who repeals healthcare from their people unless you are purposely trying to keep your people sick and unhealthy, and then obviously uneducated as well. But
I feel strongly about healthcare. It should be an absolute American right. If you're an American, you should have health insurance. Period. Just like you should have the rights to a good education. Period. Why are we trying to privatize our education system? Why are we trying to kick people off of healthcare? It comes down to money, comes down to profits, and that needs to stop. That's something I would vote very strongly against, and I believe a number of us would.
against the repeal.
Absolutely.
Got it.
The Affordable Care Act needs to be strengthened, does not need to be, boondoggled by Trump and every other Republican who wants to do that, including Scalise, by the way.
We're actually out of time.
Well, we have.
Well, because I have to do the updates.
Okay.
Yeah, we're like right at the end.
Are we done?
I mean, I want to get on other topics, but I also don't want to do the thing that we've done repeatedly to candidates on the show where we ask them a really complicated question, by the way, you have 45 seconds to answer. like the time we asked Royce Duplessis about what do you think about the
HIV?
opioid crisis and
Right.
the
What
HIV?
do you think about HIV and the opioid
You have
crisis?
45
right
seconds
now?
to tell us give us a solution to the opioid crisis. You have 45 seconds. Go.
No, he's joking, obviously. All right, go ahead and do what you need to do, and we'll wrap up the hour.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much, Jim, for coming on.
Thank you for
It's
having
been
me.
a pleasure getting to know you and to hear your views on it. Looking forward to see the campaign and seeing you go up against Scalise. And just want to make sure to repeat this for the record. Steve Scalise, you are welcome to come on anytime. I sent you an email, actually sent you several emails. I know that there's no chance you're going to respond, but I would love to see you come on in and talk to us about your really terrible beliefs that you have.
And any of the candidates.
Oh, yes, any of the candidates. So actually, I don't know. Is there other candidates that have announced for this yet?
There are none.
No. So currently there isn't. But if anyone else does announce for this race, you're more than welcome to come on. With that, the last thing I want to do before we get ready to go is finishing up our weekly activism updates. There's a couple of things going on this week. One of them is this week is Fossil Fuel Fest. It's a festival that has been organized. It's a week-long examination of our relationship with the fossil fuel industry and what a world would look like where we would divest from that. The weekend of programming includes a bunch of film screenings, performances including Quintron and Miss Pussycat and Rory Danger and the Danger Dangers, speakers and workshops. The film screenings are going to take place starting today through April 5th. So that's today through Friday. The actual festival is this weekend, the 6th through 8th. It's all free and open to the public, and you can find more information about it at fossilfreefest.org. That's fossilfreefest.org. Also, which I mentioned at the top of the show, but I want to mention again, the Action Network is organizing a bus trip to Memphis for the anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. You can find more information about that at actionnetwork.org. On Wednesday, April 4th, there's also the People's Assembly monthly women's dinner. The New Orleans People's Assembly welcome all folks who are dedicated to the uplifting the voices of working class women of New Orleans. Come break bread and get fed physically, mentally, and emotionally as we are offering discussions on women's issues of concern and how to organize for solutions, community building, strategies for self-care, information on our collective work, and more. It's also it's free dinner, childcare, and transportation is provided if you need it. Two more things. Indivisible, New Orleans, we are having an event this Thursday. This is going to be a fun one. It's having fun with the protests. It's an event called We Can't Stop Until #NotOneMore. It's this Thursday, April 5th, starting at 4:30 outside of Senator John Kennedy's office at 500 Poydras. I don't know if you guys saw this. Senator Kennedy came out. He was wanted to propose this bill that was going to make sure that dogs are protected on planes.
And then he also wanted to teach people how to do CPR on dogs too.
Yeah, this whole thing about dog safety on planes. And this is sort of out of left field. And then he was asked in the interview where he was announcing this about gun control and what's going on with March for Our Lives. And he sort of had no response to that, and he was like, I support the Second Amendment. And so he supports, safety for pets on planes, but he's got nothing to say about, protecting people and kids from getting shot up in a mass shooting. And so the event that we're doing is we're asking. Oh, I can look that up. Okay. I used to know it, but can't. There's just so many Republican Louisiana legislators that get so much money from NRA. It's hard to keep who got what money straight. It's a lot usually. So for this event on Thursday, we're asking for us to come dressed as your pet. Bring your pet, bring your kids. There will be prizes for best kid and best adult costume. We're hoping that maybe if we ask for comprehensive, sensible gun control while dressed as pets, maybe he'll get confused and put
Confuse
forth a bill
one for the other.
Yeah.
Okay. I
and
see that.
Put forth a bill. The last thing I wanted to mention is the NOLA Moms are screening a movie called 91%. That's this Sunday, March 8th at 7 p.m. at Urban South Brewery. That's 1645 Chapachula Street. It's John Ritchie's documentary on gun violence in America, and it's part of it proposes background checks for all gun purchases. It's something that 91% of Americans agree on. Why aren't we doing this? And so at Urban South this Sunday, April 8th, the NOLA Moms are going to be showing that screening. Then Urban South is actually $1 of every beer that's sold during this event is going to be donated to the NOLA Moms.
Awesome.
And yeah, that's our last update.
Great. Any closing words for us, Mr. Francis? Or
I would just want to say about that Kennedy, in his attempts to create a bill that would make it illegal to put pets in overhead bins. There's already a law against that, and his efforts are still going forward. It's absurd.
American government.
What's that character? He's like Foghorn. The
Foghorn Leghorn.
Yeah, that's just John Kennedy in the.
I say boy.
And it's baffling because he's this character that has he'll say just 99 really dumb things, and then he'll say one thing that makes sense. You're like, wait, what?
Or one honest thing, like the omnibus bill that he did, or that they passed last week. Somebody came up and asked him, said, what do you think? And he goes, I think it sucks. He said it's a Great Dane's sized whiz down people's legs. That's how he described that omnibus bill.
Hey, you want to hear something funny?
Before we go, Jim, where can people find out more information about you?
Well, you can go to my website, jimfrancisforcongress.com. Go to Facebook, facebook.com/Jim Francis for Congress.
Do you have an Instagram?
I do, and I also have a Twitter, which is @JimFrancisLA01.
Gotcha.
You want to hear something funny? Yes. Here we go. Oh, it didn't play.
Okay, well, I actually do have. I actually do have one. So for folks out there who might be a politics nerd like me, go back and look at. There's a confirmation hearing for a federal judge that Trump put forth that happened about a month and a half ago, where it was one of the rare moments of John Kennedy making sense.
Oh yeah,
where he totally asked this guy a really simple line of questioning that a first year law student would know,
and he didn't.
The guy just spent 5 minutes being like, I don't know. And he was like, wait, where did you get your law degree? Right. Why don't you know these things? And so basically you have no experience, no knowledge of any of these simple things that you would have to deal with every day as a federal judge. And you want me to vote for you. And just the video is amazing because you see the other Republicans who are looking around like, what are you doing? Right. Stop asking questions. Right. It's amazing.
All right, now I got funny for you. Here you go. Hang on.
Hey boy, what's the idea of jacking that pot up onto me? Jack? Pot? Jackpot. Yeah, that's a joke, son. Don't you get it? I made a funny, son, and you're not laughing.
I just spit water all over myself.
Hang on, one more. Here we go.
Boy, but doesn't listen to a word you say.
Those were all foghorns. Listen, in all seriousness, I just also want to, before we go, because we do have to go right now, we're going to end with a song by Woody Guthrie called Ludlow Massacre. The Ludlow Massacre was an attack by the Colorado National Guard and Colorado Fuel and Iron Company camp guards on a tent colony of 1,200 striking coal miners and their families at Ludlow, Colorado on April 20th, 1914. Of course, I am playing the song now to respect and honor of the horrific Passover massacre that happened on Gaza by the Israeli Defense Forces. Jim Francis, thank you so much for joining us on Resistance Radio.
Thank you.
Kenny Francis, without question, the smartest person named Kenny in this room.
Mark Allen, the best doctor on that side of the table, maybe.
It's a pleasure, as always. Resistance Radio will be back.
Thanks, Jim, for coming.
Next week. And then also you can find Resistance Radio on Apple iTunes. You can download us on the podcast. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kenny.
That the company owned. We moved into tents up at Old Ludlow. I was